So let's get started. We will be discussing secondary materials once again, and today we'll be talking about Part 2, Treatises. Remember to log into TED-Ed before you continue with the screencast, so this way you will get credit for seeing the screencast. Also, I suggest that you go into full screen mode when you're viewing this so that you can see the details of what we are discussing. Okay, so as I mentioned, we will be talking about treatises, and my favorite question, why do you care? Or really, why are they useful? So first, let's define what they are. Treatises are essentially books, titles really, that are very specific and very much in depth. So that is, they cover a single specific topic, and they cover it in a great amount of detail. So treatises are essentially the other end of the spectrum from encyclopedias, which of course cover a whole lot of different topics and give you hopefully a good introduction, but don't go into very much detail or analysis. So why is this a good thing? Well, treatises are going to help you to understand the area of law. They're going to help you analyze the different primary authority and synthesize and give you some context. So, for example, I'm sure in class you've read cases where one case has one holding, another case has an opposite holding, and you have to figure out why. Treatises will help you explain that. Treatises can give you some historical context. Treatises may also give you a sense of what the developments in the law might be and evaluate those developments that have already happened. Another thing treatises will do, some treatises anyway, will give you very practical guidance. Some treatises are very practice-oriented. They're designed for practicing attorneys in a particular area of law, and they will give you things like forms or checklists as you are representing a client. They may give you samples of different other documents you have to draft, like interrogatories. So treatises can be very practice-oriented. They can also be very scholarly as well. There are times where treatises may be considered persuasive authority and cited by a judge in an opinion. So, for example, if you are practicing in the copyright area, it's very possible that you will cite to Nimmer on copyright, which is one of the leading treatises in the copyright area. Okay, so we know what they are and why we might want to use them. How do we find them? Well, of course, there's your favorite reference librarian. And while I say that somewhat jokingly, although I really am very serious about that, it also is to remind you that, of course, you may go down the stairs and ask a reference librarian now at the reference desk, but even after you graduate, you are welcome to use the library and ask questions of the reference librarians. If you are in the area, you're welcome to come in. If you no longer live in the area as an alum, you can give us a call. Basically, you have privileges to use the library for life as an alum of the school. So that's one way. Another way we've already seen, and that is to get references from other sources. We've seen references in encyclopedias, in ALR. You might get them from research guides, or even you might get a decent treatise reference from Wikipedia. We will find treatises on Bloomberg, Lexis, and Westlaw, and I'll show you how to do that in class, as well as specialized topical legal databases such as RIA and CCH. And again, I'll be showing you those in class and how to find treatises in those systems. You may also find treatises on Google, actually in a special area of Google called Google Books. There are several different special areas of Google. Google Books is one, Google Scholar is another, and we will be investigating all of those. And one more way to find treatises are through library catalogs. We have a catalog here at Hofstra, and that's called Lexicat, and there are other catalogs as well that I will show you one. But what is a catalog? A catalog is essentially an index to book titles and journal titles, but not article titles. And what do I mean by that? Essentially, you will find titles to journals like the Hofstra Law Review, the Hofstra Labor Law, Employment Review, but you will not find in the catalog references to the articles in those journals. What you also will not find in catalogs is full text. Whenever using any source, it's important to understand what it does and what it doesn't do. logs will give you references to titles, to authors, to subject descriptors, but you won't have full text reference. So a tip for using catalogs, and honestly a tip for any research, is as you are thinking about looking for your subject, you may want to think about the broader area in which your subject falls. So as you can see the example here, if you have a question regarding consideration, if you're looking for a treatise, you may, since you're only searching the titles, you're not really searching the text, you may not find a treatise just on consideration. You may want to think about, okay, so what broader subject does that really fall under? And of course, you remember from first year, consideration has to do with contracts. And so if you look for contracts in the catalog, you will find lots and lots of really great treatises. And this is a tip not only for using catalogs, but really for any keyword searching when you have a particular issue in mind. So you may want to think about the broader area that our issue falls under and look for treatises and other resources using that broader area. So as I mentioned, there are a couple of useful catalogs. We talked about Lexicat, which will tell you what we have here at Hofstra and what we have here both in print as well as ebooks. There's another catalog that's useful called WorldCat, and that is a catalog that basically combines the holdings of many, many, many different libraries' catalogs. So as you can imagine, that's a whole lot of treatises and a whole lot of titles. And that will help you find titles that we may not have here at Hofstra, but that exist elsewhere that you could then follow up and find. So let's take a look at Lexicat, Hofstra's catalog. And if any of you have used Lexicat before, you might think, wow, it looks a lot different than it used to, and that's because it does. It recently got a facelift. So you can start by plugging in your keywords like you do in just about any other search engine these days. So you all know how to do that, so we're not going to go through that right now. But let's investigate some of the other ways of using the catalog that might be useful. And first, I'm going to look at title. Now you might say to yourself, but wait a minute, why am I starting with title? We don't know any titles yet for our area. So I'm going to show you a trick I like to use, which I stolen the name from Google, the I'm feeling lucky trick. So I'm going to guess that I'm going to find a title having to do with our area. Now I'm going to take my own advice and I'm going to think, okay, we're interested in whether or not our HMO might be liable. But I'm going to think about the broader area that might fall under. I'm going to think, well, you know, we're talking about someone who had a medical issue, so I'm going to think about healthcare law. So I'm going to hope I get lucky and find a title that starts with healthcare law. And sure enough, there are lots of titles that start with healthcare law. So in scanning down, one that catches my eye is Healthcare Law, a Practical Guide. We have a client. As I mentioned, treatises are really good about giving practical advice for practicing attorneys on what you need to think about as you go through the various issues of addressing your client's issue. So let's take a look at Healthcare Law, a Practical Guide. You see there are actually two different ones, and hopefully now that you are thinking about bibliographic awareness, one of our themes of the course, you notice this one's 1985 and this one's 2012. Now, one thing you might want to know when you're looking in a library catalog, when you see a dash after a year, that means that that resource might be updated. Not always. And again, because you are now know to be bibliographically aware, you're going to know, well, I kind of really want to focus on the one that's going to be more up to date. So let's take a look at healthcare law that is actually a website. This one tells me it's print, and I know that because it's giving me an actual location and a call number. So let's take a look at the more recent one. And sure enough, this is telling me that this particular title is on Lexis because it's requiring a Lexis login. And one useful tool that our catalog or useful function our catalog does, is it will tell us the different treatise titles on Lexis, Westlaw, and Bloomberg. So that's actually one way of finding those titles. So let's go ahead and click on the link. And what it does is it brings me straight into Lexis, into the table of contents. Now I had logged into Lexis previously, so I went straight into Lexis. If you don't log into Lexis first and click on that link, it will just give you the interim login screen. You put in your login information, and then it will bring you again straight to this table of contents screen. Again, because we're concerned about bibliographic awareness, we want to know how up to date this is. And so that's one question you always want to ask yourself, whatever you're looking at. Maybe it makes a difference, maybe it doesn't, but make that determination. So we want to know how up to date this is. So the first place I would look is publication information. And the only one that looks possible is copyright. So I'm just going to tell you on Lexis, they sometimes have in the table of contents for treatises this what's new. And sure enough, that tells us publication update. Sometimes it's there, sometimes you need to go to copyright. So in taking a look at what's new, I basically see that our treatise was last updated in September 2015. So that's definitely a good sign that this is going to be a useful treatise because it's very up to date, although even if it wasn't so up to date, it still might be useful. And now I know how up to date it is and how much I can rely on it for currents. Okay, let's go back to the catalog. And now I'm going to try a different tool within the catalog. So we tried the title search. I'm going to try an advanced keyword search. I can do that here, or actually there's a link right here for it. And what I see here is a multiple box entry format. We're going to see a lot of this in different databases that we look at, especially index databases. And again, the catalog is essentially an index to book titles. So the nice thing about the advanced keyword search is it lets me specify the different fields I want to search. So I could do the title field, or if I knew the author I wanted to search, etc. But I'm just going to plug in some keywords. And this time I'm going to try a slightly narrower area of law. Healthcare law is pretty broad, can cover a lot of different topics other than what we're worried about, which of course is whether we can hold this HMO liable. And of course an HMO is a managed care type organization. So I'm going to see what we can find. Just a regular keyword search with managed care law. Maybe I didn't get lucky and my title search didn't work, so let's try the keyword search. And as you can see, we get a list of results, and the second and third, which are actually the same, as you can see, Strangers in the Night, kind of a funky title, but then we can see Law and Medicine in the Managed Care Era, so that sounds pretty good. And again, these two different entries, one is telling me it's print, and I know this is print because it's law classified, and of course I know this is online because it's saying a website. So let's go ahead and look at the record. And to get to ebooks, really, that Hofstra has, really the only way to get to ebooks that aren't on Lexis, Westlaw, or Bloomberg is through the catalog. So it's another reason to understand how to use the catalog. So let's go ahead and see what an ebook looks like through the catalog. Now you'll see it says online version access limited to Hofstra University users. So while you're here as a student, you will be able to access all of our ebooks. Unfortunately, once you graduate, you will not be able to access the ebooks, and sadly, you will no longer have access through Hofstra to Lexis, Westlaw, and eventually Bloomberg. And the reason for that is these publishers, through their license, limit us to what I like to call current Hofstra people. So while you are still a current Hofstra people, you can access all of our online resources. Once you graduate, then unfortunately you will no longer be a current Hofstra people, but you still are definitely welcome to come into the library, and then actually you can get to at least some of these resources that way. So let's see what the ebook looks like. And it brings you to this platform called EBSCOhost. We'll see this again, and you can see the book in full text, or if you scroll down, you can drill down through the table of contents. Ebooks still, I think, are problematic technology. A lot of people get frustrated with them because the printing is very limited. The printing, it depends really on what the publisher decides the printing is. So sometimes they can be very restrictive. But anyway, that's what an ebook looks like. I'm going to go back to our record because I want to investigate yet another aspect, another tool, way you can use the catalog, and that's these subjects. Now, I mentioned that one thing that catalog lists are subject descriptors. Really what a subject descriptor is essentially what you're used to using on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as tags, as the hashtag. So when you see hashtag really cute cat, you know if you click on that, you will see other posts on that service about really cute cats, probably lots and lots of them. So what we see in the catalog is essentially a tag that tells me that this title has to do with managed care plans, law and legislation, United States. It also tells me here are other tags, so it tells me what some of the other subjects are. So if I click on this subject descriptor or tag, what the catalog will do is tell me other titles in the catalog that use that same tag, just the way your hashtag works. And sure enough, there are 35 of them. And by clicking on the link, I can now see 35 different titles that use the same subject tag, managed care plans. And so I found 34 more potentially useful titles. So I take a look at them and I see this achieving quality, but that's 1997. Again, I'm always being bibliographically aware and looking at the date. CCH Managed Care, 1996. These are kind of old. So another tool I like to use, and a lot of databases have these, you've probably seen this, is I want to sort it, and I want to sort it by reverse year. Sometimes it's reverse chronologically, whatever the terminology. Basically, I want to see the most recent first. And sure enough, taking a look at that, here's one called Healthcare Benefits Law. That sounds pretty promising, and that also looks pretty current with that dash and then nothing after it, so that's telling me it might be updated. Here's one, Managed Care Litigation. That sounds pretty promising. 2005, a little older, but still could be very useful. So that's using the catalog to find titles, both ebooks and print, and using the subject tags to find other titles when you on the same subject. There's one other catalog worth knowing about, and that's WorldCat. And as I mentioned, that is a catalog that pulls together many different libraries' catalogs, so it's got a whole lot of titles to look through. And again, that's useful because that lets you see if there's something that exists that maybe Hofstra doesn't have, so it's not in their catalog, that might be useful for me, and then I can investigate how else to get it. So we can search WorldCat quickly, and I'm going to try a different search just for give you a sense again of how important it is to be flexible in your terminology. So managed care plans liability. When I'm in a database that covers a larger scope of things, I tend to get a little more specific. And again, we can see, actually, looks like some promising books here. That one's a little old. I could do my sort trick, their date newest first, and see what of interest I find. Okay. So that's it for treatises and finding them and using the catalog. Again, you should already be logged into TED-Ed, so you can just jump over and to the Think section and answer the questions now or log in later to answer just those few questions. Thanks, we're done.